Oral questions by members.
Member for Surrey White Rock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just 1 month ago, this government delivered a budget that is completely unreliable and completely unrealistic. $4 billion contingency fund, almost all gone. And now, $3 billion drop in revenue. And the servicing costs on this new debt over the next 3 years will cost taxpayers over $215 million. My question through you, Mr. Speaker, is a very simple one. What services is this Premier going to cut?
Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker, and through you to the member opposite, thank you for the question. This budget focused on a number of specific things. One, protecting core services for British Columbians. We know in these times of uncertainty and threat from the South, this is not the time to make big cuts for people. We also, if the member would let me finish, we're also deeply focused at looking at our own spending. And this is about ensuring that every dollar that British Columbians trust us with is well deployed. And it's normal to do a review and take a look and make sure that things are landing exactly as we wanted them to. We're doing that work now, Honourable Speaker. And it's very important also that we're focused on growing the economy. And that piece is absolutely key, Honourable Speaker. I have many more things to add to that. I suspect I might get the opportunity.
Member supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So here's the problem with the minister's answer. Is the cuts, they're already happening. We'll talk about that in a second. The minister gets up and talks about the fact they're going to review their own spending. That's great. She can start with the person next to her in the Premier's office, who's seen his office increase double-fold with his own political staff, including a sweetheart severance package to his chief of staff of almost $300,000. Start with that, Minister. So the minister is talking about cuts. Let's talk about cuts. Let's talk about the cuts that they've made. Let's talk about the cut to the Surrey White Rock Learning Centre, a cost of $200,000 annually to keep that open, over 150 kids served by that, cut by this government, cut by this government. Band programs for kids in Surrey, cut by this government. Buses for kids with disabilities, cut, it's right, true, cut by this minister. Mr. Speaker, my question is a simple one. What other cuts can this government expect from this minister, from this Premier, because of their incompetence?
Minister of Education.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And I think it's really important to let the member know that in the face of the economic uncertainty and what's happening in the South, our government made really strong choices in this year's budget to protect
Let me know when you're finished. Minister will continue.
Thank you, Speaker. We made really strong choices to ensure that we're protecting core services like education. The Surrey School District is receiving over $1 billion in operating funding this year, which is a 62% increase from when we formed government. I want to let the member know that decisions about local education...
Members, come to order. Members, question was asked. Now let the minister answer.
Surrey
Minister?
School District received $641 million under the Leader of the Opposition. They now receive over $1 billion under our government. Decisions around local programming is made at the school district level. I know the member knows this. I know the member will be advocating in his community with his local school district where he should be. Thank you.
Member for Columbia River Revelstoke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last year, Angel Flight East Kootenay provided flights for over 1,000 critically ill patients from Cranbrook to Kelowna for treatment, primarily for cancer care. To continue to provide this critical service, they have requested a mere $250,000 from the province, with no response. The cost of servicing the debt after the cancellation of the carbon tax could pay for 210,000 Angel flights. Why is this government cutting Angel Flight East Kootenay?
Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. I think he very rightly points out that people living in rural communities depend on government and other partners to help reduce the barriers and costs that they face when accessing cancer care. Mr. Speaker, that's why we have invested millions of dollars into assisting people with their travel costs, and specifically on cancer care through programs like Angel Flight, through programs like taking care of the accommodation costs that people face. Mr. Speaker,
Members. Please.
Mr. Speaker, the member points out that Angel Flight undertakes incredibly important services, that they have had a funding agreement with the province in the past. And Mr. Speaker, I would ask the member and this House to wait just a little bit longer to learn what we're going to be doing with Angel Flight.
Member for Surrey Cloverdale. Member, you have supplemental?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, but respectfully, that answer is completely unacceptable. This service is provided through volunteer pilots on their time off. This government gave $1.2 million to the Drug User Liberation Front, but can't find $250,000 to transport critically ill patients in the East Kootenay for life-saving treatment. This and Pelly Bellingham's increased salary could have paid for these Angel flights. My question again, Mr. Speaker, why is this government cutting Angel Flight East Kootenay?
Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. This government isn't cutting Angel Flight East Kootenay. Thank you.
Leader of the third party.
Honourable Speaker, citizens should not be responsible for making sure regulators are following the rules. But that's what Indigenous and non-Indigenous groups were doing in court last week, arguing that the BC Energy Regulator broke its own rules to greenlight construction of the Prince Rupert gas transmission pipeline. The PRGT pipeline goes through some of the most critical salmon habitat in our province. Impacts to salmon, ecosystem health, and communities were supposed to be assessed in a cumulative effects assessment. Yet, the BC Energy Regulator bypassed this legally required assessment of PRGT and allowed the rushed start of construction on a section of the pipeline. My question is for the Minister of Energy. Will he ensure the BC Energy Regulator follows its own rules and conducts a cumulative effects assessment of the PRGT project?
Minister of Energy.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. The member will know that this matter, the issue of the substantial start of the project, is before the Environmental Assessment Office right now, and going through, as he would expect, a thorough review. The BC Energy Regulator does an excellent job in regulating based on the very thorough laws in British Columbia energy projects, and will continue to do so. Member supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Minister noted, the project is waiting a substantial start decision after the 10-year environmental assessment expired last November. Besides being taken to court, PRGT has already been given a warning for environmental violations because pipeline workers failed to properly assess endangered species habitat before clearing land. It's clear this project is being rushed through, putting communities, water, endangered species, and ecosystems at risk. Local residents say their concerns have not been acknowledged, much less addressed by government or industry regulators. The decision to approve the PRGT pipeline is expected in the coming weeks. My question this time is for the Minister of Environment and Parks. Will she direct PRGT to complete a new environmental assessment that takes into account the true scale of harm to communities and the environment?
Minister.
Well, thank you, Honourable Speaker. And we have an environmental assessment process that applies in this case. It's being thoroughly applied by the regulator. The reason you have such reviews and environmental assessments is to allow such independent review to take place, and that assessment is occurring. I understand the member may have strong views himself and maybe want to make representations in that process, and in some ways what he's doing now is a form of representation, I suppose. But, Honourable Speaker, the environmental assessment, the project on the issue that the member raises is before the Environmental Assessment Office, and they'll be making a decision in due course.
Member for Kelowna Mission.
Mr. Speaker, the only social development office in Kelowna was moved into the heart of the Rutland business community. Since then, small businesses have seen net profits go down 25% each year because their customers feel unsafe. When the small business community asked the ministry office to provide additional security 24/7, the ministry declined. When they asked the ministry to join them and the City of Kelowna in financially supporting their on-call neighbourhood patrol team, the minister declined. Government is about making choices. Why has this government prioritized funding the Drug User Liberation Front while leaving hard-hit small businesses paying out of pocket for neighbourhood security as they struggle to survive the consequences of failed NDP drug policies?
Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite for the question. I've said this many times in this House, and I believe it to be true. Every British Columbian should feel safe wherever they are in the province, including in Kelowna.
Members, you don't have to chime in every time, please, when somebody stands up. Please. Please.
You will know
Please.
that we're strengthening policing, but also rebuilding the critical services that support policing all across the province. The opposition leader's old government cut funding for crime prevention. We have enhanced it. We've strengthened policing, and we will continue to do that.
Member supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Sunday, I was cleaning up garbage, crack pipes, and needles on the streets of Rutland with residents, and I can assure you that the minister's promise of people feeling safe rings hollow with what people are going through. Now, the Minister of State for Community Safety was in Kelowna last week visiting with stakeholders, and I'm sure he got an earful. Can the Minister of State please let us know what specific commitments and action items he committed to in order to address the consequences of this government's failed drug policy in my riding and in the community of Rutland in particular?
Minister of State for Public Safety.
I was waiting for the light to come on, and thank you for the question. I was in town the last week, met your city representative, your mayor, the BIA's Resident Association, Party SOS team, and I listened to very carefully what are some of the initiatives that can bring balance back to the community. And the conversation is ongoing, including a few items, and I'd be more than happy to discuss. It's a little too long to go for it now, but we are going to work together to make sure people feel safer in your neighborhood. That you have my word on it. Thank you.
Member for Kamloops North Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government used to fund rapid attack crews for wildfire response in Clearwater. Sadly, this government dropped the rapid attack crew in Clearwater a couple of years back. The District of Clearwater has now been forced to use their own municipal funds to set up and pay for a Rapitak crew to protect their community this summer. Why is the Premier forcing communities to protect its citizens from a wildfire because this government won't? And how many other communities will now have to fund their own wildfire response teams?
Minister of Forest.
Thanks very much. Mr. Speaker, I was a little eager to get up because I was in Clearwater a couple of weeks ago. I had an opportunity to be able to meet with the mayor. I spent quite a bit of time.
You said no to the Rapitak. Please visit.
Keep wasting your time. Mr. Speaker, I had an opportunity to be in Clearwater, had a chance to be able to meet with the mayor and council, talk about the challenges in their community, but also the opportunities that are before us. First of all, the BC Wildfire Service is world class, absolute world class. And for the members across the way to think that the BC Wildfire Service would abandon communities like Clearwater is absolutely shameful. If there are fires in communities, the BC Wildfire Service will be ready to respond, whether it's in Clearwater, Prince George, anywhere. That's our commitment to British Columbians. That's our commitment to the people of Clearwater.
Member supplemental.
Thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. While the minister is talking about his listening and learning tour, he did not support the Rapitak crew in Clearwater. He did not support funding for that critically needed service. So the minister is not being truthful when he says that there's having the necessary resources needed for these communities.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'd be happy to sit down with the member and explain how wrong he is. These are decisions made by the BC Wildfire Service, and I would add, and I had this conversation with the mayor, there are a number of reasons where we deploy resources and a number of situations in which we have conversations with local government leaders. I welcome the decision by the mayor and council in Clearwater to be able to join us in developing their own resources that we would help fund in the case of upcoming wildfire seasons. But for the member across the way to somehow insinuate that we are not providing supports to communities, that we would somehow not support a community like Clearwater if a wildfire occurred is absolutely wrong and really unfortunate. The BC Wildfire Service is world class. Just ask the people of California. When they needed help, the BC Wildfire Service stepped up and headed down. Over 40 people, incident management teams, wildfire attack crews. We will support communities like Clearwater. We'll support communities all across the province. It's why we had a record year with people wanting to join the BC Wildfire Service. Boot camps are starting next week. We're ensuring that we're ready to go for the 2025 wildfire season.
Member for Peace River South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Premier and the Finance Minister have thrown BC into a fiscal black hole. This government will be forced to cut and underfund services in order to keep within their record-setting $11 billion deficit. The government already needs to cut $1.8 billion due to the consumer carbon tax. Why don't they remove the $200 million associated with the industrial carbon tax as well?
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Thank you, through you, to the member opposite for the question. We made a commitment during the election that when the federal government stepped back on their carbon pricing, we would do the same thing. And that is what we did yesterday, Honourable Speaker. But we will ensure that large emitters continue to pay their fair share.
Member for West Kelowna Peachland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prince George Regional Highway Rescue Society is a volunteer team responding to Highway 16 and Highway 97 accidents. They remain chronically underfunded, begging for enough to continue to serve their community. They often ask for $100,000 and only get $40,000. This government found $16 million to push illicit drugs on BC residents. Why can't they support the hardworking people of the North who are doing everything they can to keep their communities safe?
Minister of Culture and Tourism.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. You know, our community charities do incredible work, and that's why I'm proud our gaming grants continue to provide them with resources of over $140 million. We increased the funding to allow for capital funding for community nonprofits, like the member mentions, by bringing $5 million more into the system to support them with their equipment, with their life-saving necessities in many cases, to do upgrades and to support their work. So happy to hear more from the member, but I would encourage any member, if they have questions about gaming grants and how they might have affected different nonprofits in their communities, to either reach out to the Community Gaming Grants Program themselves. They're a wealth of information. They have really good information about the application process and how to ensure that community charities get the best for their neighbourhoods. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Member for Fraser-Nicola.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In many of our small rural communities, infrastructure is a huge concern. Lillooet, a small community of 2,000 citizens in my riding, requires about $100 million in upgraded infrastructure to survive. Other small communities around the province need even more. Why does this government continue with its anti-resource development agenda, knowing it's starving rural communities of the funds and jobs they need to survive?
Minister of Energy.
Honourable Speaker, recently in response to American actions against Canada, we highlighted 18 projects across BC. The official opposition is against 12 of them. Against 12 of them. 18 projects creating thousands of jobs in every part of BC, and they were against them. They talk a good game. When it comes to real projects in real communities, they're against them.
Member for West Vancouver Capilano.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to clarify a statement made earlier regarding Surrey's school district budget, that it was $640 million and is now $1 billion. But that's because there are more students, along with inflation and salary increases and so on, not because there's more dollars per student or more money for programs. Just to clarify. Mr. Speaker, in 2017, the BC NDP committed to remove portables from Surrey. I believe it was by 2020. 8 years later, there are more portables than ever, and the costs of the portables and the moving of the portables and the upkeep of the portables has cost Surrey School District directly, like many other school districts, millions of dollars, millions that should have been spent on student learning. Mr. Speaker, how many school districts, like Surrey, will have to continue to cut vital programs like learning centres for our students because of government cuts?
Minister of Education.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and the member just simply couldn't be more wrong. The very first thing our government did when we formed in 2017 was invest $1 billion extra into the education system, which was critically underfunded by the Leader of the Opposition and his government closed 256 schools. They sold 21 properties in Surrey that could have been used for schools, could have been used to eliminate portables. They fought teachers all the way to the Supreme Court, costing the system millions of dollars and not focusing on...
Members. Shh. Members.
The Leader of the Opposition and his government didn't focus on students. They didn't focus on employees in the school district. They didn't focus on the core needs of education. Our government is continuing to invest in education year after year after year. In light of Trump tariffs and a desperate economic time that we are facing, our government protected education. We protected core funding, and we're going to continue to do that.
House Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. AMHA, the Aboriginal Management Housing Association, desperately needs funds to renovate a number of vacant units that could house low-income Indigenous people. With just $1 million that they've been asking for to keep pace with the dire affordability crisis that we are in, countless families could be supported. And we all know that Indigenous people that are unhoused and left to fend for themselves in these risky situations, overcrowded housing, they become homeless. We know that where the statistics take us from there. Why is this government cutting supports for our most vulnerable people in a time when what we need to do is wrap around support and find the money and find the housing and support the important work of the Aboriginal Management Housing Association to do the work that they need to do?
Minister of Housing.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. The member surely knows that we have made the largest investment in the history of this province for housing. The largest investment in the history of this province for Indigenous housing, Honourable Speaker. We're the only province in the entire country that is investing directly into Indigenous housing, both on and off reserve, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, that only started when we formed government. This was not something that happened in British Columbia prior to us coming into government. We continue to support AMA with historic levels of dollars. In fact, just last year, we provided them dollars to do the retrofitting, to fix up units that needed to be repaired so we can get more people in, Honourable Speaker. Every month, we're seeing new Indigenous housing units opening up. In fact, in the member's community, the member will know. If not, I'm happy to share the information with the member. We're opening up housing on reserve for Indigenous communities. Sorry?
Members, just wait for your supplemental, please.
Perhaps, Honourable Speaker, the member and I can sit down and I can share with the member the investments we're making, where those units are. In fact, we're being lauded across the country, and other provinces are being lobbied to, in fact, take the steps we're taking to continue to support Indigenous housing. Happy to sit down with the member to show the member where the investments are going and how we're supporting communities.
Member for Kamloops Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What we've heard here today is clearly a government that has absolutely no plan on a budget document that is less than a month old. You know, the budget did not contain election promises like the senior bus passes, the grocery rebate at $1,000 a household, the K-3 teaching assistants. We heard the Education Minister talking about that. Well, the teachers union said, well, at best, it meets contractual obligations in the budget this year. No new spending for education in this year's budget. Instead, we have a reluctance to fund things like Angel Flight from this government, RAP attack crews into small communities that are surrounded by forests with wildfire threats and a long distance away from the hubs of the BC Wildfire Service. Road rescue, again, doing critical work, not being properly funded. Small municipalities, not seeing any infrastructure help from this government. School programs being cut under the watch of this government. And what does this government do? They cut $1.8 billion of revenue out of the, well, actually $2.8 billion out of their budget last night in revenue, and refuse to tell the public in the middle of budget estimates what substantive cuts will or will not be happening in their budget. Well, they did tell us one thing will be cut. Low-income households can expect to lose their climate action tax credit in addition to the grocery rebate this government won't deliver on. They have no problem cutting programs, it seems, when it impacts low-income households, 65% of BC households, by the way, but they won't tell us what they're going to cut with the other $1.8 billion. So again, to the Premier and the government, when will this government provide a detailed costing of what cuts we can expect and where of the $1.8 billion of missing revenue that they created with their bill last night.
Minister.
Honourable Speaker, what we've witnessed this morning really was a phenomenal display of hypocrisy. This leader of the opposition was part of a government that cut programs and services to people in all of the areas you identified this morning. All of them. All of these areas. Every single one of them. Every single one of them, Honourable Speaker. Every single one of them. Every one.
Members, come to order. Members, no argument with the chair. Please.
Honourable Speaker, we are facing unprecedented times. We were bringing out this budget at the same time that we were experiencing threats from the South that are unprecedented, Honourable Speaker. The budget literally came out the same day as the tariffs came out.
Members.
Honourable Speaker, this is a very important moment in time where we are absolutely shoring up protections for people. We are protecting core services. We are...
Member, Minister,
we are not...
I don't think the opposition...
Talk to the guy beside you.
Minister, please conclude.
Mr. Speaker, we are protecting services for people while we're doing core reviews to ensure that every dollar is landing where it should. And, Mr. Speaker, we've created a $4 billion contingency fund so that we can respond to the initial impact of tariffs, Honourable Speaker. We are standing up for British Columbians, standing against what's happening down south, and we are protecting people every step of the way.
The bell ends the question period.